Okay. Ready? Right.
I like him, man. Where's your tennis shoes?
Was a good deal. We looked at
He had tennis shoes on.
I hear.
Oh, okay. Hey, now you're going to bragging again.
interest rates are going up.
Are they?
First time in about 2 years, there's a place that's offering 3% on a 5-year CD.
Oh, really?
The Pentagon has that little credit union that works, and we belong there. And yeah, it's 3%.
Boy.
I mean, that's, I know, it's unheard of, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
Hey, great job. Great job on the Pamela thing. Rusty's having a meeting with some of the folks.
Yep.
Good job.
Yes, sir. Army.
Ed, is there anybody that you'd like to give this to? We're going to be away next week.
Yeah.
If you'd like to give this to somebody, please feel free to do something. Be with Mickey and Minnie.
Where you gonna be?
With Mickey and Minnie.
Done.
Yes, sir.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the December 3rd meeting of the Gastonia City Council. We hope everyone had a super Thanksgiving, and now we start thinking about Christmas. I'd like to, at this time, call on Councilman David Curlin, Dr. Curlin, for the prayer, after which we will stand for Pledge of Allegiance. Please.
Would you bow your heads with me, please? Creator and provider of all, be with us now as we prepare to do your work this evening. Open our minds to the possibilities of great things for the city of Gastonia. Give us the wisdom to make good decisions for our citizens and the fortitude to do the right things for our community. All this we ask in your holy name. Amen.
Thank you, sir. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. this time, I'd like to have a motion for adoption of the agenda, item C.
Motion here, sir.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, please raise your right hand. Okay. Item D is approval of the minutes of the regular council meeting of November 5, 2013. Is there a motion?
Motion.
Is there a second?
Second here, sir.
All right, some discussion. All in favor? Raise your hand, please. Thank you. Item E is presentations. You know. Okay. Oh, it's President. Okay, Mr. Stephen Crane, and he's ready to come. Executive Director, Reinvestment in Communities of Gaston County, Inc., reference Continuum of Care Program Update and Community Housing Development Organization Update. Stephen?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Members of council, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you this evening. I'm going to talk about the two hats that we wear as a nonprofit organization, and we have passed around some handouts. I'll go in the order of the activity as it's listed on the agenda. First, the Continuum of Care. Continuum of Care is a community plan to organize and deliver housing services to meet specific needs of people who are homeless as they move to stable housing and maximum self-sufficiency. That includes action steps to end and prevent a return to homelessness. That's a national designation, and Reinvestment in Community serves as a lead agency for about 45 to 60 agencies across a 3-county region, which is Gaston, Lincoln, and Cleveland County. Annually, we have a number of projects and activities that we have to do based on HUD rules, Housing and Urban Development rules. And the biggest one is what used to be called the Super NOFA, or Super Notification of Funding Availability for Housing. It's now called the COC program. 2 years ago, in 2012, it was in late 2011, but it was for fiscal year of 2012, emergency solutions or emergency shelter grants were rolled into Continuum of Care responsibilities, and that included a number of sheltering programs and what was then known as HPRP, or rapid rehousing as is now known. And so as a lead agency, we have a responsibility to oversee grant applications to those programs, score them locally, and then consolidate them into what is known as a consolidated application for both programs, both ESG and the Continuum of Care program. And I've listed for you some of the agencies that receive grant funding under those programs. Once we as a community score that and promote that to the collaborative application, then HUD, for ESG, it goes to the state of North Carolina, which serves as the lead agency for ESG, and through Department of Health and Human Services, and the program NOFA, or the COC program grant, goes directly to HUD. Then they score it at a national level against 440 other continuums of care, or continua of care, and then we get a scoring, and then programs are funded or not funded based on how well we do as a community. And it's really, really important. There are some points of information that are critical for us to first identify that there are homeless people in our communities, and second, what are we doing about ending that homeless state, the stability issues, and go from jobs to housing to education to services, program services such as medical services or life services such as food stamps and you know, a number of those types of issues. And all these different agencies work together, and they bring their information together in a quarterly process. We call them quarterly meetings, and report on those. And we have a number of committees, which I've outlined for you in your packet as well. So that's how the continuum is set up. A number of things that are both successes and challenges is, one is we're seeing a decrease, a slow but steady decrease in what is known as chronic homelessness. These are people who experience a homeless state 3 times in a 3-year period, 3 or more times in a 3-year period, or don't have a lease, a steady lease, for 6 months or longer within a given 1-year period. And what we say, you'll hear the word pool. The pool of chronic homeless is getting smaller, but the homeless state continues to occur with numbers of different people. And the way we track that is through what we call a point-in-time count. And that is held in January, the last week in January of every year nationwide. And we participate in that as well. 2 years ago, the definitions of homelessness were changed at the federal level, and it created a number of confusing data counts across the country. And it seems like every week we have a new notice or communication coming down that tells us that this is how we want you to count it this year, and this is how we want you to proceed and push different programs that will eliminate or prevent a return to homelessness. HEART Act, which it was a reauthorization of McKinney-Vento, which was, I talked about last year, about this time last year, came into being with some of the rollout and rules this past year. And that created a number of pressures on the lead agency of continuums and us being that lead agency. And those challenges are around data collection and interpretation and making sure that we're addressing the specific outcomes or the specific things that come out of the information that we're collecting, such as who are the homeless population, where are they coming from, how are they returning, and what are they doing? Are they getting jobs? Are they seeing an increase in income? Those kinds of data points. And we've spent a lot of time trying to collect information from a number of faith-based organizations that provide food, shelter, clothing, types of activities, and then try to identify those individuals. It's very possible that somebody would potentially go up and down the street, so to speak, and try to get different services from different organizations. And this leads us into what is known as HMIS, or Homeless Management Information Systems. In North Carolina, it's an organization called the Carolinas Homeless Information Network, or CHIN as we call it. And those types of data collections give us about 14 or 15 data points that we look at: age, race, income status at entry of a program. So if somebody comes into a shelter program or checks into a day shelter program, there's a way that we can find out how well they're doing to get into a stabilized housing process. And ultimately, I talk about linkages, and it's the linkage between a person who's living on the streets, or a person who is couch hopping, or a person who is in a hotel for 2 or 3 weeks because that's when their Social Security money runs out, and then back out on the street for that last week in the summer months, or in an overflow shelter in the wintertime for that last week. Those are the folks that we're really focusing on and trying to get to where they're going to be able to maintain a lease or maintain the linkage between the street back to a permanent housing situation. Because if they have certain funding, when I say funding, if they have a disability income, and a lot of people do work, they are using their money inappropriately in a lot of ways, and we all know some of those reasons. But the issue that we have to really address is, do we have enough programs and resources to be able to create a seamless kind of system within a community? So those are the challenges that are in front of us. Part of the action plan, obviously the point-in-time counts, these are federally mandated expectations of communities. Those fall on to all of the agencies within a continuum to participate in that. coordinated assessment and intake. This is a big process of, and we did receive a planning grant this year, and about a $10,000 planning grant to begin developing a coordinated assessment process that we can move a person from a street to a housing scenario in a very quick period of time. A number of communities, Durham and Winston-Salem in particular, have already begun basic implementation of some of their programs, and we're getting ready tomorrow, and then again in January we're going on a field trip to find and look at those systems and try to replicate some of those systems in our community. Business and government engagement. I'm here again to invite you to attend some of our quarterly meetings, participate in any of the committees at any of the times, and I've given you a copy of those meeting dates. And you are all, I have all of your city emails, so I'll be happy to include you in some of those. I know Mr. Mayor and a couple of other council members have gotten emails from our Continuum of Care mailing list. Please don't put them in spam folders. Those are basically announcements of those meetings, and you're welcome to attend any of those. But it is a challenge to address the needs of our communities, not just in Gastonia, but all throughout Gaston County, and be able to establish the linkage between the agencies so that we can, for example, if we have a family, or we have an individual, or we have a person being released from a jail situation, that we can find them the appropriate housing and try to get them back into society in the right way. And I think that's the highest goal that we can do as a community. Any questions about that? Yes? Is that me?
Mr. Try it again. Okay, Mr. Crane, try to speak fast. Just wanted to know how many people that you've helped in. Just want to find out how many people you help in a permanent manner to get them into permanent housing
In
this past year. Yeah,
in Gaston County or
yes.
across, right close to about 110 individuals have been, from last year to this year, have been moved from homeless situations to permanent housing.
And is there some type of training program that you put them into prior to them going into permanent housing?
Each agency has a different tactic or process. As One Ministries, for example, will offer a number of different training programs through their day shelter program. The Salvation Army has a number of life skills programs. Our organization, we do what is known as RAP, or it's a wellness recovery action program. It's more of a group discussion, group meeting kind of process to be able to live within a community, because a lot of, like in our case, our apartment complexes are, there's a lot of close living, scenarios.
Mr. Crane, I know it's a thankless job, but thank you for helping out those 110 families. Really, that's a credit, sir.
We
Thank
really
you.
appreciate it. Thank you.
Are we experiencing any displacement from other counties into our area, in that we may have better benefits or outreach? And I know there's a number of cities in the United States that currently, especially during the winter months, are experiencing this, where we got to go to city X because they offer better benefits. Are we seeing that from any of the counties that are our neighbors coming into Gaston?
Actually, it's the other way around. We tend to send people to Charlotte.
Okay.
Salvation Army is our primary emergency shelter, and then they've accepted the overflow shelter that opened up just a couple of, 3 weeks ago now, 4 weeks ago, when winter nights get below 40 degrees. We actually find that we have a deficiency in the ways that we can house people in a very short-term process. The family shelters, the youth shelters are the ones that are really, really the ones that are full all the time. Now, how do we address that? We can talk about opening more shelters, or we can talk about how do we, approach that from a number of different, angles. We're getting more engagement from the school system, which is a good reporting process, because there's a number of children who are in families who are homeless, that are couch hopping, and those are probably the most difficult for us to count, because they are, in one sense of the word, they're not homeless because they're sheltered and they're living with a family, but the family is not stable, and
Right.
that's where we want to get people to be stable.
Well, thank you for your response, and again, thank you for your fine work, sir.
Appreciate it.
Did the government shutdown have any impact on your revenues coming in that you go with your grants?
It delayed, particularly with ESG funding, it delayed a number, most of those programs are reimbursements. So the agency is paying those bills and then submitting for reimbursement. And a number, particularly in ESG, it really didn't impact the program, the COC program, where there was permanent rental assistance, permanent housing rental assistance for a number of programs. Because in the case of Shelter Plus Care, Partners Behavioral Health is the agency that receives it. They have enough cash flow in their operations to be able to cover that delay, so that it did not prevent a landlord from getting a rental assistance payment or a,
Now, is behavior, what was that the lead agency?
in that case, Partners. It used to be called Pathways.
I was gonna say, is
Pathways.
that the old Pathway?
That's the old Pathways.
Okay,
Right.
okay, great.
They do
Thank
the
you.
Shelter Plus Care program. Any other questions?
Any other
about
questions?
the Continuum?
Stephen?
Well, I'll go ahead and talk about the Community Housing Development Organization. Again, another handout, stapled handout for you. It's pronounced Chodo, so if you ever hear the word Chodo, any of the city staff talking about it, we're a private nonprofit, community-based service organization, and our job is to provide, develop decent, affordable housing. We do that in a number of ways. We can sponsor, we could be the developer, we could be the owner, we could be the manager in a number of different kinds of projects. And I've listed for you a number of the projects that we have developed, constructed, and are managing, some that we have developed and just sponsored, others where we have sponsored, and those are very complicated processes. You hear from for-profit developers all the time for this project or that type of project. But as a nonprofit developer, the focus is to create the housing units that are going to meet the needs that are outlined in what you have as a consolidated plan or a 5-year plan. And we're part of that consortium, and serving as a community housing organization, our job is to try to partner with other community organizations to bring to fruition new housing developments. We've been in existence since 2003. I began with the organization in 2010 when the founding director retired. And so, if you remember, some of you may remember Mary McCrite, who was the founding director of the organization. And we have two major points of focus. One, again, is develop those partnerships both with the city through the Home Consortium, which you've probably heard a number of different reports from Myra Messer about that over time, on a range of collaborative efforts. And working in collaboration is probably a lot like herding cats. Every agency, whether they're faith-based, secular nonprofits, organizations, people that want to help and don't know how, we're doing a lot of capacity building with other agencies to bring them to the table to try to create new housing units or rehab housing units. And so everybody's kind of going off, and we need to try to always focus on bringing them back to what is the outcome, what are the outcomes, whether it's rehabilitation, newly constructed units, but with the bottom line of safe, decent, and affordable housing. The other major focus is, again, to develop, construct, and manage supportive rental housing for people who cannot get to that level of where they can become homeowners. Now, I'm looking, and here's the challenge both for you as council, for us as a community, because I know a number of people even here in the room have worked with what I call the final linkage. How do we get a person back to homeownership if they were homeowners at one time and they are no longer? They've had to go back into the rental process. That, to me, and we all probably agree, that homeownership is the highest and best form of stability within a community. And that is probably the most difficult struggle that we have in our community, day by day by day. In this packet are pictures of some of the projects that we have built or developed or sponsored. On the last page of those pictures are the most recent ones, which just last Thursday, we got certificate of occupancy for what we call the Highland East duplexes. And we have our first residents moving in next Monday. We have 3 out of the 4 units. People are moving in on Monday and Tuesday, the 9th and 10th. And then the 4th resident will be moving in the following Monday. So we'll be housed a total of 7 more people, 2 couples, 2 sets of couples, 7 more people from homeless situations, and they're fully prepared at this point to move in and become good tenants, and that's the big thing. Highland has been an interesting process because we've had lots and lots of people walking by as we've built it and want to know what we're doing and how we're doing it, and it's giving us an opportunity to really talk about how we do it. And it is very difficult because as a nonprofit, a lot of these projects do not come, they come, we're using home funding to build a lot of the units, but we also, under the new rules, we have to do what is known as layering. So there's a lot of players in putting all of these projects together, whether it's North Carolina Housing Finance, HUD directly and other sources, Federal Home Loan Bank, private sources, those kinds of things. So it is a tremendously complicated process sometimes. And we have hopefully a couple of rehab projects coming up in the next year or so. And as soon as we can get those finalized and bring presentations back to our Housing and Neighborhoods Administration, we'll be talking about those as well. And then the last pictures on that page are a HUD, what is known as a HUD 811 project that we have going up over in Shelby, which is for people with severe persistent disabilities. And we're really excited about that one because that'll be our 3rd project in that fashion over across the 3 counties. Let's see. Are there any questions about what we do as a CHODO? I know I've taken up a lot of time, but I would like to come more frequently. It'd probably be better that way. I can tell you a little bit about everything as the seasons go by, and that might probably be a better process than doing it once a year. Because
Love to have you.
so thank you. So, any questions?
Questions?
All right. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate your time, and hope to see y'all maybe down the road on some of these meetings as well.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. It's bad, isn't it? Well, read that for me. Okay. Thank you, Stephen. And item F is public expression, which we have no one that's signed up to speak. Before the consent agenda, let me recognize, if I can, from Troop 19, I believe that we have a Boy Scout, and his father is Mr. Norris. Is that correct? And what's your name, young man? Step over here to the microphone, please. We're going to drill you a little bit. Yes, sir. Did you say Tim?
Tim Norris.
All right. And you Troop 19?
Yes, sir.
All right, sir. And where do you go to school?
Honeyhurst.
Good. That's great. All right. So, well, what's your rank?
Star Scout.
Yeah, okay.
Going up to the light.
I know where you're going, yeah, okay. Okay, well, we're glad to have you, and congratulations to you.
What
Any
badge are you working on?
Communication.
And what does that lead to? Like how many, is that part of an Eagle
Yes,
required?
Yes, it's an Eagle required merit badge.
How many badges you have to go before you become an Eagle?
21.
Okay, good.
You got that? Okay. I'm glad to have you both. Thank you very much. Yes, sirree.